breaking down the top 10 questions that you should be asking yourself for all things running backs ahead of 2026 fantasy football drafts with the one, the only, Establish the Run's finest, John Daigle. What's up, Johnny Football?
Doing great. It's that time of the year where all of us are getting tagged in for season-long discussions, tiers. I saw you for RotoWire also just put out a video of your tier running backs. I, along with you, are also ready to discuss everything, and I actually prefer to talk about running backs more than wide receivers, maybe because there's less of them, maybe because there is a skeleton key in fantasy football and all it is touches, so we're just trying to find who's going to get touches. So yeah, I'm really excited for this show.
And it seems appropriate, John, because again, we're fully moving into home leagues, redraft season. I get it. But a lot of times, best ball, I think, can help point us in the right direction of topics that are going to become more prominent amongst the, more casual players as August comes. And this has kind of been the year of running back, man. We've seen it multiple years in a row now. These guys have finally stayed healthy. We actually have 16 to 20 running backs you can argue project very nicely. They have this bell cow roll. It seems like everyone's finally buying into running backs. I just can't help think, John, that once we all kind of buy into something, that's when the rug pulls out.
Correct. I agree with you. And that's why I'm a lot more open. Even after last year, this is not even a humble brag. I won multiple championships in charity leagues and friends leagues, industry leagues that you and I both play in. But I only say that because everyone thought, despite the increase the past 2 years in elite running back production, that you then had to jam 2 heavy running backs to start your draft. But that's not the case at all, especially when you get into deeper 12 and 14 team leagues. There were so many championship teams last year I had where I was even starting guys like Audric Estime and Devin Neal, for example. You got to remember, the running backs will come. You have to win them off the waiver wire or have them stashed, but they will happen. Even starting someone like Woody Marks and RJ Harvey in the last month could have netted you a championship because the rest of your team was then elite and being extremely efficient, especially if you drafted all the 49ers, Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy included. So I think there are multiple ways to win fantasy championships. I'm not necessarily trying to suddenly think zero RB is dead, but we're going to talk about some late round guys as we move on in the show.
We've seen some weird running back performances over the last few years. Amir Abdullah, I think, was the RB8 during the 2024 fantasy playoffs. Bam / Zonovan Knight was the thing there for a little bit. Again, it really is that one position where just one injury has to happen before someone you've never even heard of all of a sudden is on the cover of those waiver wire articles. And by the way, guys, if you are looking for some fantastic waiver wire articles, I invite you to check out Johnny's work over at ETR amongst the rest of their glorious crew. You guys really are setting the standard, and I appreciate you, my brother. With that, let's get into the show, John. With the top of the draft, I think everyone's going to be needing to ask themselves this question: Jahmyr Gibbs versus Bijan Robinson. If you're a hipster who prefers Jamar Chase, fine, go right ahead. But for me, Daigle, these are the top 2 players in fantasy football. I have been confidently just going with Jahmyr Gibbs because I think both him and Bijan are awesome. I think they project for similar volume. I think they're also in the prime of their careers. I just think the Lions' scoring offense is going to be much, much, much better than the Atlanta Falcons. Is it really that simple?
I think it is. And I'm not even saying this is what's going to carry over, but we do have 6 career starts without David Montgomery for Jahmyr Gibbs, and he's averaged an absurd 27.4 PPR points in those 6 starts. Last year, it was hit or miss to close out the season, even with David Montgomery injured for Jahmyr Gibbs, because, as we expected, the offensive line cratered. A unit that they really didn't make any improvements and just lost people during last offseason. They understood that, the Lions did. And this year they improved it both in the draft and in free agency. So I think it's a significantly better situation for the Lions. I expect their offense to be humming along again, especially with Dan Campbell once again calling plays as he did in the second half of the year. And so I will have Jahmyr Gibbs. Right? What now?
I think Petzing's calling plays. It'll, of course, be a collaborative effort. But
yeah, because that was really John Morton's issue last year. A lot of play callers across the league, but John Morton literally did not learn a single thing and carry over a single thing, for whatever reason, from Ben Johnson. So I would imagine Dan Campbell will not let that happen again and will still make sure the foot is on the gas at all times for this 2026 Lions offense. Having said that, Bijan Robinson, still a very comfortable 102. Last year improved in both yards per carry, touches, target share, especially points per game from the year prior. And that was including being out carried by Tyler Algier inside the 5-yard line. Algier has since moved on to Arizona, and maybe Brian Robinson gets that role. But really, I think Bijan Robinson is a comfortable 102 given the running backs and wide receivers that then come back to you if you pick in the first two spots.
Both guys capable of catching 80 passes, and both guys have that one hitter quitter home run speed that we love. So the Petzing thing has just been the only potential red flag. But man, you mentioned it. Just seeing last year Campbell take over from Morton and just kind of get the offense back to grooving, which kind of was just an example of him putting more work on Jahmyr Gibbs' plate in the first place. That should give us solace, I think. It went bad last year. They made a bad OC hire, and it still didn't really matter. I'm with you. I think the offensive line issues were far more detrimental than anything about Gibbs down the stretch last year.
I'm also a Petzing bull. There aren't many of us I know, but if you remove last year when everything fell apart in Arizona, which is now a tanking team, the Cardinals were second and third in team yards per carry the 2 years prior. I think he's actually one of the more intuitive run game callers in the entire league. And now with a beefed up offensive line, I just think it helps and makes gives Jahmyr Gibbs more progressive play calling between the tackles.
I've always looked at kind of like team running back yards before contact. That's one of those things where it can kind of give you a decent idea of like how good a schemer is and the play caller is. And we do regularly see the Ravens and the Cardinals, the teams with the dual threat quarterbacks of the world, rank highly in it. But give Petzing some credit for managing to do that with or without Kyler. I get it. These last, again, 2023 and 2024 seasons, as you brought up, we did see the Cardinals actually work as a top 8 offense in EPA per rush. So I'm with you there on liking Petzing. And also Daigle, like I've tried to just revert to some, more real life ball knowers. Not that we don't know our X's and O's, but for me, ESPN's Ben Solak, Yahoo's Nate Tice, very, very sharp guys who I lean on a lot. And they both love the Drew Petzing hire, so who am I to overly disagree with that? But again, guys, Jahmyr Gibbs versus Bijan can't really go wrong. If you want to draft Bijan, go for it. Me and Johnny, though, team Gibbs 101. It gets a little more interesting after this, all right? We got Chase, we got Puka, we got JSN, maybe even our one true sun god in this next conversation. Next running back conversation, though, is Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor. So the common adage, John, has been like when CMC's healthy, he breaks fantasy football. That is true. I'd also argue it's pretty much true for Jonathan Taylor, man, because we only saw 2021 when he led the league in rushing. And then last year where he still averaged, I think, north of 20 points per game, even with the second half fallout. Those are pretty much the only 2 years he hasn't had some annoying early season injury he had to eventually work his way back through. So CMC, JT, pretty much the consensus RB3 and RB4. Any good reason not to take them in round one?
In round one, it's fine. But where are they going round one? I'm personally skeptical. And I can sit here saying this now, even though I believe you and I did a show together last year, and I was skeptical of Saquon Barkley at that time too. Yeah. I took Bijan Robinson, and I made my entire personality around Christian McCaffrey from 110 on over Saquon Barkley last year. And I'm using the same argument for Christian McCaffrey this season and why I'm worried about him. His 450 touches were the 10th most of the 21st century last year. And there are only 38 times that a running back handled 350 plus, including the playoffs, since 2014. So over the last 12 years. And only 6 of those running backs, 15.7%, improved in points per game the following season. That includes Saquon Barkley last year, who handled 480 plus touches in 2024. Then last year lost 7.7 points per game as the RB15 that you drafted in the first round. Not great. I'm not saying McCaffrey's going to reach that point, but it's at least nitpicking enough in the first round where I do want other players over him, including Justin Jefferson, who we're not going to talk about on today's show, but I just think there are better situations for me to draft in. Same thing goes for Jonathan Taylor, who I'm worried about. Through week 8, everyone recalls with Daniel Jones healthy, the Colts were first in EPA per play. Jonathan Taylor in that time was the overall RB1 ahead of McCaffrey with 27 PPR points per game. In the second half of the season, though, Daniel Jones is injured. The Colts fall to 21st in EPA per play. Jonathan Taylor falls to RB9, averaging 11 fewer points per game than that first half of the season. So my point is, when you zoom out and ask, which Daniel Jones and Colts offense are we going to see? Given Daniel Jones's career, most likely it's not the one that's the most efficient offense in the entire league. It's somewhere a median between that first and second half. And if that's the case, I am a little bit worried about Jonathan Taylor, given that throughout his career, he has yet to put together a double-digit target share in every season. And that's how you spike an overall RB1 finish. So in best ball, we're talking portfolios and many teams. I'm going to naturally sprinkle in those individuals.
Sure.
But if anyone's watching because they're a home league drafter, just your recreational, better and more fun fantasy football drafter, they probably care about 1 to 3 leagues. And like in my quote unquote 1 to 3 home leagues, I'm not taking Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor. And that's just me.
I tend to agree with you, but it scares the shit out of me, John.
Oh,
We
yeah.
could just be looking at it again. And I kind of did a similar study you did and had one of the same takeaways too, where like the yards per carry fell off quite a bit. That's kind of been the case for CMC for quite some time. Like all the rushing efficiency metrics that we, fantasy alleged experts care about, they tell you that CMC was a bad rusher last year. It just doesn't matter when you're legit a wide receiver one that happens to be playing running back. So that'd be my only, potential pushback with CMC. It feels like we're just saying like, well, look at the history. I get it, but the history isn't littered with running backs catching 100 passes like CMC.
I completely agree with you. I just think the argument is a lot like George Pickens this year in that I understand if you missed the boat because you were scared last season with Christian McCaffrey, Pickens, but now you're just chasing them at the prices that we kind of figured they'd end up in. And I don't like chasing last year's points because we don't get last year's points. And if you do, please call me. I want to join your league.
That would be quite handy. So last thing on JT, which is why I would still keep him RB4, even though I'm with you. I've been clicking Amon-Ra St. Brown and even Justin Jefferson often over him. Last year, you look at teams that actually left one running back on the field for at least 90% of their snaps. Very, very rare in today's NFL. Only the 49ers, the Colts, and the Raiders, actually shout out Ashton Genty, did that for at least a quarter of their games. So that would be my one argument in favor of Jonathan Taylor. It's that he's not really this guy who doesn't catch passes anymore. He pretty much had career-high fantasy numbers from receiving last year. We don't have a Nyheim Hines to really be worrying about these days. So could that change with Giddens or McCollum or one of these other guys? I guess. But I do think, like, I've heard the wide draft Jonathan Taylor when Derrick Henry is there around later. And Henry's, we'll talk about him in a minute. He's perfectly fine. But JT, I think his newfound pass game floor a little bit maybe underestimated.
I understand the argument. And again, I'm going to sprinkle these guys in, but Jonathan Taylor is one that most likely I won't have a lot of given his ADP and the fact as we move along here, the next tier of running backs, I like a couple guys quite a bit over JT and Christian McCaffrey.
How do you like my name, John? RB5 through RB12 right now. And I'm just using best ball because I do think that ADP will generally be how we shift things in home league. But from picks 11 through 18, again, we have freaking 8 different running backs going. The Great Wall of RBs, John. That's what we're going with.
It's very catchy.
Thank you. Out of those RBs, John, again, we have Ashton Genty, James Cook, Saquon Barkley, Omarion Hampton, Kenneth Walker, Chase Brown, Devon Achane, and Derrick Henry. Again, this is what you guys are going to be seeing in drafts, end of round 1 into the mid part of round 2. Which one of these guys do you want on your team the most, and which one scares you the most?
I'm going to take Ashton Genty over Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor. I think he's in for a massive year. Last year, of course, was blaming solely the offensive line and play calling, quarterback play as well. We're just changing everything up for Genty this season and having the number 1 overall pick at quarterback, a offensive coordinator or play caller, head coach, I should say, in Clint Kubiak that just allowed Sam Darnold to have a career high in yards per attempt and vastly improved offensive line, including one of the best centers in the entire league, Tyler Linderbaum, now really calling the shots from the center of their trenches. Not only that, but the Raiders last year were one of only 12 teams in the last decade to score 80% of their touchdowns through the air. Unsurprisingly, that's a high number, so none of those 12 teams have been able to duplicate that number the following year. Thus, we're kind of expecting more rushing touchdowns. And I looked at where running backs were both drafted and then finished in PPR leagues on Twitter, by the way, not Jay Daigle, for those follow-up seasons. And there are a handful of minor hits and misses, but like if you draft the RB14, let's say, and he finishes the RB30, that seems detrimental. You can get by with that. That doesn't win or lose your league and vice versa. But there were massive hits for those running backs in the following years. Orleans Darkwa, if you recall, for the Giants in 2017, was undrafted. He finishes the RB40 in points per game. James Robinson in 2020, I believe it was the RB67 drafted. He finishes the RB7 in points per game. So Ashton Genty is being drafted, as you said, at the end of the first round, the RB5. There's not many more hills for him to climb to be any higher. But I do think there's the outs for him to outscore Christian McCaffrey this season. So that's a player that I'm focusing highly on at the first, second round term. The other one,
on Genty, John, the big issue here would just be, Do we think the offense is going to be that much better? Improved? Sure. All right. They don't have much room to go, but up. I like Clint Kubiak too. You mentioned Linderbaum. Quarterback situation should be better. Again, not a high bar. I do like leaning though, because this is July. We're all optimistic about everyone. It's the fun thing to do during the summer months. I like leaning on the Vegas implied team scoring ranks at this point and seeing what the, people in Sin City think about it. Raiders offense, 28th right now in, again, implied scoring rank. I went ahead and I did look in the past at how correlated are high-end fantasy running backs with their team scoring ranking. It is pretty strong, man. Only quarterbacks actually, in fact, had a stronger kind of R coefficient when looking at that thing. That said, I should say the biggest variable that helped running backs and bad scoring offenses still be great in fantasy land, it was that pass catching upside, man. I think the average of like the 14 running backs who have pulled this off, average at least 50 catches. The median was about the same thing. And it was like 12 of the last 13 caught at least 40 balls. Derrick Henry was the only one that didn't do that. So that would be my allure for like Ashton Genty. Are you confident that he's actually going to have a high target share in Las Vegas? Because again, that seems to be the cheat code in fantasy land, getting that full point per reception for our running backs. If you're catching 60, 70 passes, man, it is awfully hard to bust, even if you're in a bad offense.
I am fairly confident, especially because why it took until they started healthy scratching Raheem Mostert, I'll never know. But from that point forward in the second half of the year, that's when Genty had a double-digit target share. And in terms of elusiveness, breaking tackles, again, he was actually at a terrific rate. It's just that he was getting crushed behind the line of scrimmage at a league-high rate because his offensive line last season was terrible.
They were. So RB5, Ashton Genty is going to be John's click among the group. Who scares you, though?
You talk about fading Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor. The one I'm scared about, who I'm going to have zero of in the second round, is my boy, Aggie great Devon Achane. Benefited the last couple years with the third highest target shares in his position because of the deficiencies of Tua Tagovailoa, a statue quarterback. Now we're taking out Tua and adding a rushing quarterback in Malik Willis. We're taking away Mike McDaniel, who then understands how to change the players and get the best out of them in his offense. And that's why I assume Achane had such a high target share. But then we're also adding an entirely different head coach and offensive coordinator and Bobby Slowick as well. I'm just not sure this target share and thus the ceiling carries over for Achane, especially with a rushing quarterback taking away carries logically. So Achane is the player in the significantly worse situation that unfortunately I won't have any of.
And it's just one of those things, man, where I know what we just talked about, all right? Bad offenses, we can still have running backs overcome that by being gifted pass catchers, which Achane is. But man, we're taking a big leap of faith to assume Bobby Slowick's going to keep Achane anywhere near as involved as McDaniel was. I'm with you on the Tua and Malik Willis difference as well. Malik Willis over these last two seasons, single highest scramble rate in the league in terms of how many times he's taken off per drop back. You guys have watched Tua play, all right? He's bottom 5, but you just know, again, from watching this dude, that he's nowhere even close to that. So that's the issue, man, because I've seen also the pushback where like, well, dual threat quarterbacks help their team's run game efficiency. And that's true. The grab and the read option game, we've seen guys like Mike Vick, Tyrod Taylor over the years, like running backs have more yards per carry with them than without them. But Daigle, like an extra 0.4 yards per carry doesn't make up for all the loss in target share, and it especially doesn't make up for these quarterbacks factoring into the rushing touchdown equation once we get to the goal line.
And I also want to give a shout out to Saquon Barkley, who I believe his ADP should be flipped with Jonathan Taylor this year. You just have to ignore literally everything the Eagles did with Kevin Patullo last season. We're getting Sean Mannion now, who does come from Sean McVay and the Rams, but more importantly, at least in camp, seems very much open-minded to a far more progressive offense, not limiting the Eagles and their most talented players. You've, like myself, have written about the Vikings and Eagles, and it's funny because when you do that, all you're saying the entire time is career worst mark, career low number. That's what it is for like the Eagles and the Vikings across the board, and both situations have improved dramatically in 2026. So Saquon Barkley is also a player who I did not draft last year, but it's a new season, and I think we're going to get not necessarily to 2024 numbers, but a top 3, top 4 running back finish is very plausible.
Now, Saquon is the guy I am highlighting over this. But again, a lot of good points with Genty. I certainly don't want to be missing the boat on him as well. It is funny with some of these offenses like Washington and obviously Philly, and I'm forgetting the other one, but Baltimore with Declan Doyle. These first-time play callers, it's all going to be great, John. They're going to be under center. They're going to use play action. They're going to use motion. It's all going to work out and just be fantastic for everyone involved. But in Philly's case, that is the one situation where I'm like, good God, is that bar low? This guy has to be better.
Has to be. And that's kind of one of the lessons as every year, we do this a little bit longer. Now it's been too long, frankly, but we learn a little bit more every season and see where we went wrong. And I've said this on shows before, where I went the most wrong last year was trusting that the play callers who took over were just going to take what was right the year prior. Again, John Morton did not from Ben Johnson. Kevin Patullo did not from Kellen Moore. And that happened across the league. Nick Caley, too, for the Texans. And so just because you get a coordinator change doesn't mean it's going to be different. But at least for the Eagles, it can't be as bad. Like even the league average would be significantly better for these Eagles players and their ADP. So I'm just trusting Mannion in this situation.
I was hoping that Tanner Engstrand, would have stolen Ben Johnson's playbook, kind of like the Waterboy coach back in the day who, got, but unfortunately that wasn't meant to be either. So please, new coaches, just help our guys in fantasy. That's all we're asking. Next stretch of running backs, John. We got dogs and probably bad offenses, right? Jeremiah Love, Breece Hall, Travis Etienne, lesser extent than those two guys, but still. Also got kind of boring veterans and great offenses. Kyron Williams, Javonte Williams, Josh Jacobs. Still guys who, we shouldn't be surprised if they finish as RB1s, but obviously a reason why we don't necessarily have them ranked that way. What has been your general round 3 strategy around these guys? And do you have a strong take on anyone involved?
I do believe the dead zone really starts around Kyron Williams and Breece Hall. Perhaps they bounce back and ruin me because of that. But if you look at historically, Sean McVay has leaned on one running back. And for the first time ever last season, that did not happen. Before the Rams bye, Kyron Williams averaged 18.2 touches per game. Afterwards, just 16.9. The actual share of touches dropped from 74% to 60%, a massive drop. And that benefited Blake Corum, who was the more explosive player in the second half. Corum actually led all running backs in success rate last year and finished out second only to Achane in his rate of 10-yard carries. So I am out on a Kyron Williams committee. But before that, I do love two players in particular. Let's wait and see, I should say, on Jeremiah Love's ADP, because I'm interested. I understand the Cardinals have the league's toughest schedule. They're really rebuilding, and it's plausible that no one in that organization is there after this year. That's how really bad this situation is for Arizona. Right. But I like to take a big picture look at everything, and Ryan Heath, who's doing tremendous work at Fantasy Points, I'm sure he'll be on this show with you at some point. He had mentioned that, for speed score, when we're looking at how these players have fared in terms of their size and 40 time, Jeremiah Love, just like Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, and Travis Etienne, those were the last first-round running backs with a speed score of 110 plus. Jeremiah Love fits that mold, fits into that bucket. And so even though Jahmyr Gibbs' rookie year was the RB8 in per game points in a committee with David Montgomery, Bijan Robinson was the RB17 in points per game in a committee with Tyler Algier. Although these players still started slow, ended strong, and when they were isolated from injuries around their committee were amazing. That maybe could be the case for Love this year with Tyler Algier. I still think he's just put in the same breath as those guys and could eventually emerge as a top 12 running back. So I'll take a chance and swing on that ceiling in the third round. And then I think another great one who's going to go behind Kyron Williams and Breece Hall is Travis Etienne. The Saints are the opposite of the Cardinals this year, and that they're projected to face Warren Sharp's second easiest schedule. And Etienne, as we know, is at the very minimum a workhorse. He's had 290 touches in 2 of his last 3 years, and the Saints offense last year finished 29th in yards per carry. Now you're getting, although volatile, an explosive running back in Travis Etienne who can sporadically make everyone better. So I like Etienne a lot in that Kellen Moore offense that last year was first in plays per game.
What's the argument for Etienne over Javonte? Because is Etienne maybe a little bit better in real life? Sure, I'll give you that, but I don't need any guesswork to conclude the Cowboys offense is going to be a freaking wagon this year. I am a little bit more worried about the Saints version.
I am a little bit concerned that the Cowboys offense could be different. Like we're all copying and pasting their passing numbers from last year. And Dak has always been one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Most efficient, one of the most efficient passers, I should say, whenever everyone's been healthy. That's really been a struggle. But the defense is not going to be the same as last year. Like all the dogs they added, especially if you look at their splits whenever they traded for Quinn and Williams, they quietly became They quietly became one of the best run defenses in the entire league, and then teams just started throwing on them. But now we're adding Caleb Downs and other players who I think are going to make a significant impact for Christian Parker, new defensive coordinator there. So I am curious if the Cowboys can actually carry over that ceiling, and maybe they're just a better team this year that is not as good for fantasy.
Any concern about Alvin Kamara? Seems like he wants to play football this year.
Do the Saints want him to play football this year? That's my concern.
I know, man. If I hear you, if ETN, if we don't have the Kamara factor, if they decide, hey, you know what, I would like to go play with my old friend Sean Payton, or if the Saints just say, you know what, we appreciate everything you've done. See ya. Best of luck with everything. And they cut him okay. I just feel like they already would have done it by now. I totally get shooting ETN the top of this kind of tier of players if he is going to be just the only running back involved. But I'm just worried that Kamara is still there. We get to week 1 and it's like way closer to a 60-40 split than anyone was anticipating.
Completely fair. I've actually just washed Kamara out of my mind because I genuinely don't think he's on the roster in week 1, but I could very well be wrong.
You should not look at my underdog exposure, Johnny. We are playing some risky
I've heard
games.
about Jerry Jeudy. Don't worry.
Oh my God. Yeah. Don't even get me going with that one. So Jeremiah Love's an interesting one though, because again, once we're starting, like earlier in the offseason, I feel like he was being pigeonholed as this like round 2 pick. And I definitely wasn't doing that. But more and more as we get into round 3, Josh Allen's off the board. We already have, the tight ends we really like, or we're just kind of waiting for round 4 for Colson Loveland anyway. Like there is a point where we're starting to get in these wide receivers where it's like, yeah, maybe it is going to be the Lab McConkey, or maybe it is going to be a Emeka Egbuka or Jalen Waddle or one of these guys. Or maybe we just take the number 3 overall pick who we know is explosive, who we know can catch the football. And yeah, he's not in a great offense, but man, if that Cardinals offense is just average, below average, instead of dog shit, John, like we're going to be like, why didn't we just draft the freaking baller in round 3 and worry about the rest later?
And I think that's what Jeremiah Love and Travis Etienne allow me to do, because I really want to make all of my drafts about winning that third tier of wide receivers: Zay Flowers, Lad McConkey, Emeka Egbuka, Terry McLaurin, Luther Burden, Mike Evans. All those guys are going to compete to be top 12 wide receivers, not being drafted as top 12 wide receivers. And I want to hammer that tier, 4 to 6 of them. And so what running backs can I take that still allow me to carry out that draft plan? And I think Etienne and Love still potentially do that. That's also, though, why I'll probably jam Ashton Jeanty and Saquon Barkley up my home league boards and then pick apart the wide receivers in rounds 3 through 8.
And we'll talk a little more overall strategy here at the end too, but that is kind of, John, where I don't even feel the need to go with the double click necessarily, but hero RB in particular, if you will call superhero where you get 2 running backs early, I'm more so on just hero RB. Give me the Bijan, give me Gibbs or something. I'll figure out the RB2 later when I got probably a 6 tight end and then 4 or 5 of those wide receivers you mentioned. And
again, Bijan and Gibbs, you have to be one of your first 2 picks. By the way, I was thinking about this last night. I clearly was under the influence. We are just 1 month away from pretty much guaranteeing someone in our league takes Brian Robinson over Bijan Robinson. And I absolutely cannot wait, because you should not allow them to take that sticker off the board. They should keep Brian Robinson at the 102 whenever they inevitably draft him.
If that sticker hits the board, it's done. I don't care if you messed up.
Exactly. We've already made that rule in my league, by the way. Once that happens, because it's going to happen, it's you. It's all you from there.
I absolutely love it. I actually went into an ESPN auction mock draft lobby in like the middle of June on a Tuesday. I think there was 4 of us in there, and I nominated Brian Robinson for $50, hoping that someone would just not catch it. I got Brian Robinson for $50, John. Apparently the ESPN auction mock draft lobbies are a little bit sharper than I gave him credit for. So shout out to those guys. All right. We've kind of gone through basically like the top 18, 19 or so running backs at this point. Actually had a video go up on this channel with my guy Jagger May breaking down zero RB strategy. And this was kind of like the part that we just said, okay, we've gotten past Kyron Williams, we've gotten past Josh Jacobs. Like RB 20 on is about what you should expect to be taking running backs round 4, round 5 and beyond. These are kind of like our zero RB heroes, or at least we would like to think. Again, with this range, we have a mix of players. We got the horrible 2025 injury. Now they should be ready to go in week 1. How healthy? Cam Skattebo, Quinshon Judkins. We got other guys where it's like, yeah, there are going to be touches for him in decent offenses, but what's a split going to look like? DeAndre Swift, Trayvon Henderson, Bucky Irving, Bashaw Tuten, Jadarian Price. And then we have the potential dead zone vibes, lack of pass down rule, how good is the offense going to be? Dave Montgomery has been getting a lot of flack for that. Actively clicking or fading any of these guys? Like, was there a name or two that really piqued your interest there?
Yeah, when I talk about the running back dead zone, I come back always, though, assuming I'm still not hammering wide receivers in this spot, I come back for two players. One is none other than boring David Montgomery. The changes the Texans had this offseason emphasized David Montgomery's strengths. Whether it's Ed Ingram, who they signed for $37 million, I believe it was. They brought back Trent Brown at tackle, drafted Caleb Rutledge in the first round. Those three guys adding to their offensive line, they all rank elite at Pro Football Focus in gap blocking schemes rather than man blocking. And David Montgomery's yards per carry, 5.7 in gap blocking last year per FTN fantasy. It's a terrific situation. If you're curious how they're going to use him, just recall a couple years ago, they traded a 7th-round pick for Joe Mixon, gave him 20 touches per game as fantasy's RB9. They gave a 4th and 7th for David Montgomery. They're going to use him until he cannot be used anymore. So I think he's just a boring, we're going to beat you down and win games, RB2 that I'm definitely interested in. Also, I thought I was going to be fading this individual, but ADP didn't catch up to really the run out that Tuten has had all offseason, where they haven't been interested really in adding anyone. I understand Chris Rodriguez, Liam Cohen's boy from college, is there, but also Tuten is volatile enough in being an explosive player who perhaps doesn't pan out. You have to remember, in best ball, you mix in Chris Rodriguez. That's fine. But in season-long leagues, all we care about from 4th, 5th round on, maybe even before that, is ceiling. And Tuten is the kind of runner as the second most athletic running back in combine history, only because Mike Washington showed up for the Raiders and is now the most athletic running back ever. Tuten is the kind of player who can win your league, especially if you're taking him at his cost. So I'm going to just take a shot on Tuten every time and cross my fingers it works out after finishing with the 5th highest success rate of any running back last season.
I'm also a 2026 Tuten guy. Wasn't in the bandwagon so much last year, but new year, new me. The thing I keep coming back to, man, is like this borderline RB2, if not even high-end RB3 price tag. I feel like that's where Tuten lands in the weekly ranks. If it is like a 60-40 split between him and C-Rod, or 60-30-10, Charlotte LeQuint, Allen Jr., if we just see him week one, it's like, oh, man, Tuten had 18 combined carries and targets. C-Rod had 6, 75% snaps. In that offense, bro, like Tuten is the one guy that sticks out here where as soon as we get reasonable usage that we can, I think, reasonably expect as the lead running back here in offense we like, Tuten could be ranked in the top 12 as early as week 2 or week 3.
Completely agree. And again, it could go wrong, but all I care about is upside in our home leagues. And I think he offers the kind of upside that could then suddenly sneak, and we could be drafting in the 2nd or 3rd round next year.
So I'm with you. I'm chasing the upside too. That's why I feel like it's a little bit backwards to also be cool with Dave Montgomery. Is that more so like a build type of thing? Because I will admit, okay, if I've found my way to get, 3 awesome wide receivers early, I got a Colston Loveland in there, and I don't have a running back yet. Yeah, okay, I am a little more willing to take a guy whose ceiling is probably more of a low end, RB1, like a Dave Montgomery. Is that kind of where you're coming from?
Coming from a usage standpoint, yeah. Again, there's no skeleton key in all of fantasy football, but projecting touches is as close as we get for, especially at running back. And so David Montgomery is a guy, given the Mixon workload that I mentioned, I really do think we're looking at 20 plus touches per game. And they may not be exciting, but also we don't give David Montgomery enough credit for earning those touches alongside Jahmyr Gibbs. We always just wanted to see only Jahmyr Gibbs, but David Montgomery was very good when he was healthy for Detroit.
Kind of like the DeAndre Swift thing too. They get kicked to the curb for a really freaking good running back. Perhaps gave him a little too much slander for that. So well said. I will say there is a skeleton key, John. His name is Marshawn Lloyd, but we'll save that topic for another day.
Would you like my fade as well? Do we have time?
Yeah, what's your fade? Yeah, go.
Yeah. So we talk about this tier of players. The first thing I look for, like my alarms go off whenever we start projecting running backs who have never had large workloads for large workloads. And Jadarian Price, I can't believe the cost. Just 295 touches on his collegiate resume. And despite that small workload, still 4 fumbles, only 15 career catches. And even on a per route basis, because people say, oh, he just didn't get targets, didn't get catches because he didn't play. Jeremiah Love was first in this class in target per route run. Jadarian Price was second to last in target per route run among this class. Even when he played, he could not earn targets at all. And now we're trying to jam him 18 touches per game just because he got drafted in the first round for an offense that plays outdoors without Clint Kubiak. There is no chance in hell we are taking Jadarian Price at ADP. No way.
Okay, I do appreciate you making that argument without trying to act like George Holani is some sort of big concern that we need to be worried
He's a special
about.
teamer.
So I will give you credit there. I think it's more of a Kenneth Walker situation receiving wise. Sure, we haven't seen it, but we have no reason to actually think that Price can't catch the football. Funny but true, John. 55 receptions during his last 2 seasons in high school. Okay. How about that for Jadarian Price? And then he ruptured his Achilles, I think it was, early at ND. We don't talk about that anymore. So I hear you from the profile standpoint. A lot of people did believe it was a reach for him to go round 1 in the first place. But don't you think there is a chance that we're sitting here in November just being like, yeah, why didn't I take the round 1 running back on the Seahawks, though?
I would be shocked if we're sitting here doing that. If you loved Jahmyr White 2 years ago, you're going to love Jadarian Price this year. Love him.
Fair. I will say out of this group, I prefer Swift. I prefer pretty much everyone other than Bucky Irving to Jadarian Price. I can't get behind Bucky this year.
Well, it's very obvious, all the signs they've given us in Tampa Bay that they want to use a committee, whether it be allowing Sean Tucker to be there inside the 5 back last season, now adding Kenneth Gainwell. And I don't copy paste Kenneth Gainwell's target share from last year, which, we'll discuss Aaron Rodgers in a bit here for another running back I really like in the mid rounds. But the fact is they now have a bruising running back at the goal line, a pass catching back, and Bucky Irving between the 20s. Yeah. And so Bucky Irving, if he's not going to get those target shares because of being undersized, we are now seeing it kind of trickle out throughout his career that he's battling multiple injuries. It just doesn't seem like the ADP is worth the squeeze.
Last thing on Tuten, because again, I'm with you and I want to just continue to hammer home that he is our big target here in this range. Don't love the Chris Rodriguez foot injury, John. I'm even a little curious if it could be one that, rhymes with Kiss Frank or something going on there. It's not ideal, man.
I agree with you. And that's about it for me in this tier, though. I think I'm comfortably talked about where I'm coming back in and then zooming back out. I'm still deciding personally in my draft strategy what my tight end plan is. It's Brock Bowers over Trey McBride. I won't have any Trey McBride. 100%. Again, this is not the show for that. Invite me back on. We can talk about it in depth. But when and if do I draft Colston Loveland? And if not, then who am I waiting for? That's really what I'm working through right now.
It is interesting the fall off that kind of happens around round 10, round 11 with tight ends. But to John's point, story for another day. Let's get really gross now. Personally, I found very little reason, and accordingly, I haven't done this much, to click Tony Pollard, Chuba Hubbard, or RJ Harvey this offseason. Good idea or bad idea?
Terrific idea. You can't take the starters that are worse than the backups. We want to just rather take those pot shots on the players we think have a higher ceiling, even if we have to wait them out. And I think that's what's ultimately going to happen for this crew of backups. But starting with Tony Pollard, that's not the pass catching back. It will be most likely Nick Singleton, who again, we will probably have to wait on Nicholas Singleton to earn that role later on. But players who have played historically on passing downs have more outs in those later rounds. And Nicholas Singleton did earn a double-digit target share in his last 2 seasons with Penn State. He also averaged 1.5 yards per route run in his last 3, playing slot or out wide on 20% of snaps. So he could definitely be the pass-catching back who could outscore Tony Pollard.
And Spears should be it from week 1 either way.
Correct. The thing is about drafting Spears too, though, is that he has not been able to beat out Tony Pollard. And so I don't want to then take that chance thinking he's the one who wins the backfield. Most likely, most likely we are dropping Tajay Spears and Nicholas Singleton by week 5. That's fine. But that's why you take the ceiling shots, understanding we're going to grind the waiver wire anyway. RJ Harvey, it's always bad. You do this like me, so I know you understand. We may be talking to each other. It's always bad when you have to scroll to the last page to find a player's numbers. Cam Ward is the first player that comes to mind. RJ Harvey is the Cam Ward of running backs, where you have to go to the very last page to get to his success rate, his explosive rate. You could stay there if it talks about getting stuffed at the line of scrimmage. RJ Harvey was incredible at that stat. But very clearly Sean Payton then focused on Jonah Coleman, who does have also an elite resume. 6.8 yards per carry at just 20 years old with Arizona, 80 catches on 90 targets in his last 3 years, and his yards per route run last year was second in the class behind Jeremiah Love. So Jonah Coleman is someone who I actually think it's going to happen much quicker than Nicholas Singleton for Denver, albeit it still may be a committee with RJ Harvey. And then, of course, Jonathan Brooks behind Chuba Hubbard. My only issue with Brooks is that he still uses an O in Jonathan. I wish he changed it up, but that's fine. So I know how to spell it. I know how to spell it, so that's okay. But really just I talk about not being able to beat out the starter. Chuba Hubbard could not beat out Rico Dowdle, who was Walter Payton whenever he got a chance without Chuba Hubbard. And so Jonathan Brooks is at such a discount compared to Chuba Hubbard. Regardless of whether we've seen him play football, and we haven't for 2 years, I just think taking that dart on Jonathan Brooks is perfectly fine compared to what we know Chuba Hubbard does not offer us.
Everyone listening here, let's just all agree, don't talk about Jonathan Brooks. All right, let's keep it our secret. Yeah. Let's keep him as a late round pick. He's going outside the top 120 on Sleeper and ESPN right now. I was in an FFP draft where I saw him go ahead of Chuba. And it wasn't that ridiculous, John. I'm going in a draft. I'm looking at my ranks. It tells me Chuba Hubbard is the next player to draft. What do? I don't draft Chuba Hubbard. I move him down in my ranks. He's the Cortland Sutton of running backs. I don't want anything to do with it.
Completely agree. And Brooks is definitely going to be the biggest riser in FFPC drafts as we move along this summer. No doubt.
Man, oh man. So the RJ Harvey stuff, I get worried because I'm so out on the guy. Like I ranked him like an insulting RB 41. Like that's just a point where it's like, oh my gosh, like really? Yeah, I'm saying really because I don't see it. It wasn't as good as Dobbins. Wasn't good at all last year. And I'm with you on everything about Coleman could be a nuisance to him, both pass pro and goal line. Also still facing all those, just chasing, I should say, the Sean Payton, Alvin Kamara, Darren Sproles ghosts from past years. And we just haven't really seen that show up in Denver as well. So yeah, RJ Harvey not quite doing it for me. That said, I'm not really interested in Coleman or Dobbins either, man. I just think it's going to be this annoying 3-back committee. If one guy gets hurt, like, all right, we'll adjust at that point. But the problem is last year, and I see this pushback a lot. It's like, all right, well, what happened when Dobbins? He gets hurt every year. He got hurt again last year, and Harvey put up RB1 numbers down the stretch. That's fine. He was the only show in town during that time. I am very, very skeptical that would still be the case, even if when Dobbins gets injured, to the point where I'm kind of with you. Coleman could just take the whole handcuff job.
Again, it might be slower, but also for RJ Harvey, that's kind of why we were drafting him too. He could have been your RB2 in deep championship teams, despite being so inefficient, just because he gave you 20 touches per game. They were bad touches, but 20 touches per game, you're going to plug in regardless of your situation pretty much every time. And so that's why we're kind of talking about these running backs, because I do think that is their range of outcomes, despite going later on.
All his good plays coming against the early season Cowboys and Bengals too. I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical, Johnny. All right. After this range, this is where we get like the cheap backfields that are cheap because we don't exactly know who's going to be a leader. Okay. We got Pittsburgh, talked about Denver and Carolina a little bit already, but Washington with Rashad White and Bill Croskey-Merritt, also Minnesota with Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones. So those 5 teams, John: Pittsburgh, Denver, Carolina, Washington, Minnesota. Again, that's a big chunk of the RB3, RB4 range. I got 2 chips for you. You got to throw them on any of these running backs that we mentioned from these backfields. Who do you want to take?
You told me 2 chips, but since I just talked about Jonathan Brooks, who I will make it a point to draft in my home leagues, I'm going to push that to the side and use 2 more chips. So we're going to give a bonus to everyone listening. Love Jonathan Brooks, of course, but let's start with Jaylen Warren, because Aaron Rodgers did not lead the league in running back target rate last year because Kenneth Gainwell was that good at earning targets. Aaron Rodgers led the league in running back target rate because he cannot take hits in his age 40 season, which is also why he finished with the quickest time from snap to throw. Regardless of Mike McCarthy coming in and increasing the pace and most likely playing more 3 wide sets, Aaron Rodgers is who he is in his final years, and he's going to throw to running backs. And who do you think now will get those running back targets, considering Rico Dowdle wasn't even the pass-catching back whenever Chuba Hubbard was healthy? It is going to be Jaylen Warren. And that's how we get this mid-round running back and push him up the board to suddenly be a 4th or 5th round value. So I think Jaylen Warren has outs to lead this team in touches, but more importantly, always be viable to flex if we need it in a pinch because he's the pass-catching back from Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh. And then The second one is ugly. And actually, I'm in the minority of thinking this, and that's okay. I've been in the minority. I've been right and wrong. Totally fine. But I do like getting a discount on Jahmyr Croskey-Merritt again this year. Last year, the ADP got increasingly too high, and the pass catching resume is certainly concerning. Just 9 catches all of last year. His highest in across 5 seasons, I believe it was in college, was 13 catches. Not a pass catching back. I get it. It's something he was reportedly worked on in camp, but whether that's true or not, I don't know. The team even went out and added Rachaad White, who probably is the pass catching back. But in terms of leading the team in carries and touches, Croskey-Merritt, again, you get a 2 to 4 round discount in your home league compared to last year. Already like that. And he was still a very explosive player. He was 10th in his rate of 10-yard carries last year, finishing between Bijan Robinson and Derrick Henry. If you look at the numbers, it is those 2 elite players and then Jahmyr Croskey-Merritt right there. I'm not even squinting and suggesting we're going to get more catches because that's how we really unlock the upside of Jahmyr Croskey-Merritt. But in an ambiguous backfield with both players going in similar ranges, I do know a lot of people want Rachaad White because the pass catching resume, but Rachaad White's touches have also decreased in every season in Tampa Bay since 2023 because he could not win a committee backfield. I'm still going to cross my fingers and guess that the player we wanted to draft in the 6th round last year that we can now get in the 10th round can win a committee backfield. So I like Jahmyr Croskey-Merritt this year.
And it's unfortunate that the Bill hype got as crazy as it did because, again, it's just all relative to his ADP. If Bill had come out of nowhere to the same extent as like James Robinson, we'd be saying, oh, man, what a great rookie season he just had.
Agree. And that's why I didn't get him in much home leagues because I fear that's what's going to happen with Jadarian Price this season is that everyone's just going to assume this rookie that we haven't seen, thus we paint an infinite ceiling in our heads, we haven't just seen it yet, is going to cause the ADP to skyrocket. But I like discounts. I like discounts a lot.
Jahmyr Croskey-Merritt, Rachaad White, one of the single most important camp battles to try to figure out because, again, guys, one of these guys, whoever ends up winning that majority job, going to be moving up the ranks in a hurry. I'm with you on Jaylen Warren. My thing has just been like take one of the Steelers running backs. And let's face it, Rico Dowdle usually goes a couple rounds after, so I've been more okay getting that. I think, though, the nail on the head, I'm with you 100%. Get running backs attached to just elderly freaking 42-year-old quarterbacks because time and time again, dude, Leonard Fournette was catching 70 passes from Tom Brady at the end of his career. Drew Brees had everything going on with, Kamara and just the other guys before that. And now we're seeing it with Aaron Rodgers. Like, man, I'll run the numbers if you don't, John. There's got to be just ridiculous target totals coming from any quarterback age 38 plus.
And I am back in on, we're talking about like just running backs in general that we like in this range. I am back on Washington as a whole. It's not just Jahmyr Croskey-Merritt who's suddenly discounted. Jaden Daniels as well is one of the bigger steals. He's going to be drafted after Drake May and Joe Burrow in your league, making Jaden Daniels the target among those players. Also for Terry McLaurin, again, last year without Deebo Samuel in the field, he was targeted on 30% of his routes. He put up career highs in points per game and end zone targets in 2024 from Jaden Daniels. Assuming everyone's healthy, like these are the players, Washington's offense, similar to how we discussed about Philly's players, whose ADPs are just too low for last year's results that we're going to ignore.
The one problem, potential problem, I think James Conner is going to play somewhere. Why not Washington?
That would be detrimental.
Do you think there's many more running backs out there? I would love to see Joe Mixon holding up a newspaper. I don't know if that dude is still alive. Kareem Hunt is technically still a free agent. He might just be waiting around to see if Kansas City calls him again. James Conner is like the only veteran who I could definitely see changing teams and just kind of making this a little bit of a ruckus here. Because we have a bunch of wide receivers we're worrying about. I feel like Connor's the only running back that kind of applies.
He's really the only one that comes to mind, unless the Eagles would want to trade like Will Shipley. But you're getting into that range of players that perhaps have upside. They can also play special teams, but I'm not too scared of anyone.
Speaking of the Eagles, Johnny, who's your favorite late round handcuff? And why is it Tank Bigsby or someone else?
Tank Bigsby at best ball makes sense. I just can't imagine a situation where we're ever going to know when to start him in season-long leagues. So
pure injury contingent handcuff.
That's a lot harder. But speaking of injury contingency, there's a lot of those guys this year. Woody Marks is one. We just saw after their bye, he handled 16.5 touches per game, 2 postseason contests, 19 touches per game. So although David Montgomery's there, if David Montgomery's injured, we already have the evidence that Woody Marks will be like a low-end RB1 in terms of usage. So love Woody Marks later on. Jaden Blue, if you just want to bet against Javonte Williams having a career year, like it is the kind of age, right, where I think he's going to be 26 this year, where it's not surprising he broke out in 2 years post serious injury. But again, we haven't seen those numbers from Javonte Williams ever. So maybe it's just not the same case. Jaden Blue has reportedly matured this offseason. We'll see if that's a real thing after, he finally got a chance mid-year last year and showed up to practice with blue Versace cleats and got blisters because they weren't the right cleats to practice in. We'll see if he's actually matured, but I like Jaden Blue a lot. Ray Davis.
He is the one guy in that. Sorry, John, real quick. Like,
you're good.
Phil Maffa. I know Malik Davis actually was the backup during the second half of last season. That's like earlier when I was starting to go through his depth charts. I was like, really? We're doing the Jaden Blue thing again, even though Malik Davis had it. But if I do look at the guys behind Javonte and I try to see like who actually could maybe carve out like maybe not a 1B role, but earn a legit change of pace role, like it's definitely Blue with some of the pass catching and explosiveness he brings to the table.
And that's why I like Jaden Blue. Ray Davis is another one because a lot of times what happens when you're looking at contingency players, a lot of people think just because, let's say Justice Hill, for example, plays touches when their starter's healthy, that means that is the player who takes over. That is not at all the case whatsoever. That includes Ray Davis. Like Ty Johnson has only gotten double-digit touches for Buffalo 2 times in his career with the Bills. Ray Davis, though, the one time in the last 2 years that James Cook was injured, Ray Davis, 20 touches, 150 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown. Like that's the guy who can't get on the field because he is James Cook. So when James Cook is out, it's not Ty Johnson, the satellite role player. It is Ray Davis who gets all the touches. So I still like grabbing Ray Davis and stashing him. And then for the reason I mentioned in regression in the running game in Las Vegas, it does seem like Mike Washington is also Ashton Genty's direct backup. So I'll probably stash Mike Washington in deeper leagues too. But in season-long leagues, recall, like you have to actually look at your roster and be wary that you cannot use these guys for 6 weeks probably. Like they just sit there, and the way it works out is that the moment you scratch them, that's when they're going to start the next week. But don't worry about that. You still have to then put them at the end of your bench because you understand they can win your leagues if they ever play.
And I feel like, John, if I am going more 0 RB where my first running back is, God forbid, a DeAndre Swift or, in your nightmare, someone like Jadarian Price, that would probably dissuade me from wanting to have guys like Pacheco and Tank Bigsby and Mike Washington on my bench because I'm going to be needing to potentially tap into these guys sooner rather than later because I don't actually love my, initial depth at the position. So maybe that's when a Kenneth Gainwell or a Woody Marks or a Jonathan Brooks becomes even more appealing. Whereas if I do take Saquon Barkley and Ashton Genty at the turn, we got our 2 running backs. We're feeling great about it. I'm going to load up on other positions for the majority of the draft. That's probably when I'm more so inclined to take some of these guys where, no, we're not going to get the week-to-week utility of a Woody Marks necessarily, but the best case handcuff upside might be even higher.
Agree, and that's kind of why my draft plan changes not only every year, but really based on the league. I have an idea of where I want to go. Last year, I wanted to live in the Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall range of wide receivers, for example, because I understood like that tier can win your league. And a lot of those wide receivers did ultimately break out. And this year, like I said, it's the 3rd tier of wide receivers I really want to live in, not to mention Brock Bowers at the first, second round turn. Since last year, Trey McBride was the value. You should have picked over Bowers because he's going a full round after Bowers in your league. This year, they're neck and neck. Thus, we want Bowers and we want to fade Trey McBride.
So with that in mind, John, take me to our second to last question here. And that was, again, you kind of already answered it. So you don't have a specific like year-to-year running back strategy you typically lean on, which I think makes sense. Having a quarterback, more late round strategy, I think that is more easy to apply year over year. So looking at 2026 as things stand right now, from what you're describing, it sounds like this might be the hero RB year for you.
I believe so. Again, I want to live in the back of the draft with Ashton Genty and Saquon Barkley in particular, maybe even both of them, and then hammer wide receiver, find out which late round tight end I want the most. Last year, I was only in on Tucker Kraft, Jake Ferguson, and Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert and Kyle Pitts this year. I think I'm going to live in that range if I miss out on Brock Bowers and Colston Loveland. So yeah, I think hero RB is the way I'm going to go. But again, I'm very open-minded to robust. I just don't think, especially in home league, because best ball, you've talked about this on past shows. I know you've written about it. Quarterback ADP for everyone just tuning into best ball leagues has surged to exponential heights this year. Record breaking that the QB2s, like the QB 20 through 26 are being drafted in the 13th round. And by that time, it's only third stringers left. That's not going to happen in home leagues at all. Home leagues are still going to chase running backs heavily. And so rather than avoiding that run, I do want to make sure I sandwich myself in between that run and get at least one strong one and then start picking apart other positions from there.
I do think there's a scenario if you're kind of in the middle of round one or more of a zero approach makes sense. You get your Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, you get Brock Bowers in round two. Maybe you don't love the options in round three. So you just say, hey, I'm going to take these great, wide receivers or even a Josh Allen from there. Then more of a zero method makes sense. But now I'm with you, man. Just with more and more of the builds I've been trying to practice getting through mocks and best ball lineups and even some of the redraft leagues I've gotten in early, I just feel like getting that one running back to build around and then having the rest of your running back room just to figure out that RB2 spot, John, like that's kind of where I'm coming from here. I feel like it's the best of both worlds. We're like, it's not, obviously I feel best with my running back room if I'm taking two in the first two rounds, but like exactly what you said. And that's, I think, a sign of a very smart individual and fantasy analyst, bro. But like, it's when a running back question has to include the other positions, because we're not just trying to, singularly pick out like, oh yeah, I think Ashton Genty's gonna have a really good year. It's, can I draft Ashton Genty and get that really good year while not falling behind other positions and building the best overall roster? So that's kind of where I'm at with your RB. Yes, I think it's good for the RBs, but it's also, man, allowing us to go after that Brock Bowers potentially and load up on those wide receivers where I'm with you, bro. It almost makes me want to be in auction leagues more than ever because I just want to draft like each of these wide receivers 18 through 25.
Like in home leagues, I promise this situation is going to rise where everyone's looking at the board of players available, and it's the guys we mentioned, right? RJ Harvey, Tony Pollard, Chuba Hubbard. But also on the board at that time are Jalen Hurts, our god inside the five, and Mike Evans, our god of touchdowns. Like imagine ever drafting that tier of running backs whenever those two winning players are right there. You're not going to do it if you want to win your league. So you just have to be very wary. And that's why I'm pretty much making the cutoff Kyron Williams. And then I'm going to dance around and go from there.
And that's why it can be helpful. After you finish a draft or a mock or whatever, like go back and look at that board and just kind of see where those pockets of players you really like are. I'm with you. Those wide receivers, man, rounds even kind of 4 through 7, where you should be playing catch up at running back if you're going more of a zero strategy. Very, very tough passes there. But John, great stuff. Before you get out of here, though, I know you're a man who travels all around the world and especially America. So I want you to give the viewers, if not 3, at least 1 or 2 most underrated vacation spots in continental America.
3 spots in America, and underrated means you're going to hate these answers, by the way.
Yeah.
So I'll count down from 3 to 1. 3, New Orleans. I'm a big fan, which is why I've grown so fond and proud of the city of Chicago. I'm a big fan when any stature of life can have what they want, like 75-cent tacos or $8 tacos. New Orleans, as you saw when you were there for the Super Bowl, Ian, New Orleans is a culture that brings like Texas oil money and a poverty situation together for everyone to have a lifestyle. And New Orleans like squeezes out of you that stature regardless of where you sit in the economy. So I love that everyone can just get together and Greg Olsen can be on a run right next to us while we're drinking at 10 a.m. Like I love that about cities. So New Orleans, I think everyone should go to, especially because I'm a big food guy. Some of the best food in the entire country. Number 2, because again, underrated, so you're going to hate these answers. I think Kohler, Wisconsin, or Wisconsin in general around like the Dells is a beautiful area. Wisconsin, especially in the spring and summer, is extremely green and has a cheap cost of living. Thus, like, your beers are $2 to $4, right? But the outdoors are, like I said, ecstatic and extremely green and vibrant and beautiful. Not to mention that that's when it's warm. I understand you want to leave Wisconsin when the winter, when it's horrible and it's dark by 4 p.m. for 6 months. But I'm going to say Kohler, Wisconsin, because the golf there. But honestly, even Milwaukee is so underrated in the spring and summer. And then finally, what I tell everyone is the most underrated city in America, and everyone's disgusted. It is Cleveland, Ohio. Yes. Cleveland, Ohio is one of the best cities in the country, regardless of whether you like food, nightlife, staying in, going outdoors. There's rivers there. There's a giant lake there. The Browns play lakeside. I know you don't know because we don't watch Browns games, but honestly, Cleveland has everything you would want. I understand in the winter it gets miserable, and it can feel a little bit lonely because it is a smaller population still, but I think the town of Cleveland, despite being small for a metropolitan, is my kind of people and the kind of person I want to be. So I think Cleveland is an incredible place.
You see, John, I had to bring you on the show for you to preach the Ohio propaganda because no one's going to believe me if I try to tell them Cleveland's cool.
I am the only person knowingly that says I like Ohio who's not from Ohio. I love Ohio.
Joakim Noah somewhere shaking his head, but I'm with you, man. Like, would I want to spend a week in Cleveland? Probably not, but you can have a hell of a night or two there, guys. 4th Street is a lot of fun. Shout out to Cordelia, amazing burgers and just food overall there. Starting to get, apparently the Michelin star people are finally working their way through Ohio, so maybe that'll give us some better national attention going on there. Yeah, man, got a casino down there, multiple sports teams, varying in how good they are. I get it, but yeah.
Florida is the hell space of America. Like, imagine ever wanting to go to Florida over Ohio. No chance. The propaganda that the public has told me, that's wrong. Like, do not listen. Ohio's better than Florida.
Bro, and I'm with you. We're like, nothing is better than actually getting your receipt and being like, oh, did they get everything? Is that affordable? Because that's when I went to Milwaukee for the first time. That was my thought too. It was like, oh, I had a nice meal. I got beer as much as I wanted to, and I'm pleased with the receipt.
The kind of places that you can pay for the group and not sweat it out. Yeah.
Maybe a little more expensive down there by the bayou, but New Orleans is still awesome. If you guys do make it down there, make sure you pay your respects to our GOAT Sigmund Bloom and the rest of the New Orleans natives. But Johnny Football, fantastic stuff. At not Jay Daigle on Twitter. I see you still haven't found a way to get the actual Jay Daigle Twitter handle there. I appreciate it holding out. Obviously, you and the entire Established Run team doing some sweet stuff, man. Hell yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And again, everything's coming out at establishedrun.com right now. I've taken over all the team previews, which will all be posted by the time training camps open Saturday, because it's the time of the year where everyone is tuning back in and listening to this show.
We appreciate you guys listening into this show. If you like the show, please like the show. Make sure you guys go support all of John's work over at ETR as well. So thank you guys again. Training camp on the way. We'll be back next week with some wide receiver content, a little bit of tight end DST stuff after that, and then strictly league winning, hopefully, content as we get you guys into August and get you ready. So appreciate you guys again. For John, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, take care, everybody.